OCO everybody, as my hat says, that means hello in Cherokee. My name is Aquilla Os Fleetwood Jr. I'm the great-great-grandson of Charles and Lucinda Fleetwood. And Lucinda Fleetwood met Charles at Fort Gibson and married him after she'd walked the Trail of Tears. And I would like to read you her history of the Trail of Tears, and almost every bit of this can be found in the public realm. Anyway, so let's begin. It says, under the Treaty of 1819 between the United States and the Cherokee Nation, the Cherokees seceded that area of North Georgia, which was originally settled by the Catawbas. Now, Lucinda was part Cherokee, but she was also part Catawba, and they were traditional enemies for the most part. Those Cherokees that wish to remain in that area and become citizens of the United States could do so and receive a reservation of 640 acres to include their improvements. However, Georgia soon took the reservations, declaring that no Indian could live within the boundaries of Georgia under any pretext. Families were forced to move onto unseceded areas of the Cherokee Nation. This may have been when Hosea Morgan, my great-great-great-grandfather, and his wife, Awi Wolf, my great-great-great-grandmother, moved just across the Georgia state line into western North Carolina and came to live in the Hiwassee River area. Testimony states they applied for citizenship in the Cherokee Nation East and were rejected on account of their having part Catawba blood. But they were told they could open up fields for cultivation and live among the Cherokees. It is unclear as to when would they have applied to the Cherokees and by what method. Would there have been anything in writing, or would they simply have appeared before a council and got a verbal answer? Well, we don't know exactly all of that. The Morgan family lived in one of the valley towns along the Hiwassee River in North Carolina, and the children went to the Evan Jones Mission School, Christian school. Afterward, Hosea Morgan agreed to move to the Cherokee Nation West. In early March of 1834, the Morgan family, along with about 450 immigrant Cherokees, were loaded aboard the Thomas Yeatman steamship, and they began their trek to the reserve land west of the Mississippi. These individual groups that traveled the water routes and the land routes one after another between 1832 and 1836 became known as the immigrant settlers. Lucinda described the beginning of the journey as follows. We enrolled under Major B.F. Curry, United States enrolling officer, and he delivered us to Lieutenant Harris at Calhoun, Tennessee, where we took water in flat-bottom boats and came to Waterloo, Alabama, where we took to steamboats. That's where they got on board the Thomas Yeatman, crammed in there like a bunch of sardines. The steamboats were filthy and crowded. The contractors seldom cleaned the boats between trips, and their crafts became disease carriers. The food was disgusting, mostly cold meat packed in barrels. This is all Lucinda's account. Lucinda goes on to say, and they came 40 miles above Little Rock at a place called Burnt Cadens. Cauldron Creek is a small creek that runs into the Arkansas River, as Lucinda said, 40 miles north of Little Rock. The Arkansas River was exceptionally low in 1834 due to a series of droughts. At the mouth of the Cauldron Creek, Lieutenant Harris and the captain of the Yeatman decided they would proceed no further. The water in the river was only 26 inches deep. The boat required 3.5 feet of water. So they camped on the bluff overlooking the creek, and while they waited, a horrendous thing happened. In 1834, a cholera epidemic that had raged in Europe the year before began to sweep the United States. Beginning in the north, it rapidly worked its way south, down the rivers from the Great Lakes in northeast. By April of 1834, cases were beginning to be reported in Arkansas. Probably several days earlier, while at Little Rock, the group had become infected with cholera through contact with other whites. The disease broke out among the Indians while they were encamped, and the effect was devastating. After only 3 days at Cauldron, Lieutenant Harris recorded the following in his journey. So this is what Harris said. The sun rose bright and clear in the heavens this morning and shed around us the brilliant beams of an April day. To us it should be the wretchedness they shone upon. Notes of lamentation and woe arose upon the mountain air, and the shrieks of the dying. Insatiate death stalks through our little camp, and with an unsparing and awfully disfigured hand greedily gathers his victims to the garner. Every hope of yesterday has vanished. That all-sweeping scourge, the malignant cholera, is in our tents and has scattered dismay and horror around us. There were 3 cases of death before breakfast and 11 in all before the sun went down. At 10 a.m., I dispatched an express to Little Rock for further medical assistance, requesting by letter the aid and advice of Dr. Sprout and Dr. Lee, and the personal attendance of one of them. A number of my people are now down with sickness with various kinds, and all panic has struck, and are scattering through the woods, building their campfires as remote from each other as their several fears direct them, and all are, I am afraid, but too well prepared to receive this terrible disease, if they have not the seeds of it within them already. Okay, let's continue here. It is impossible for one physician to administer to them all. I have held a consultation with Dr. Roberts and have turned nurse and doctor myself, and my blood chills even as I write at the remembrance of the scenes I've gone through today. The clusters of cedars upon the bluff, which looks down both upon the creek and river and near a few tall chimneys, there's houses in that area, the wreck of a once comfortable tenement, the destroyer has been most busily at work. 3 large families of the poorer class are there encamped, and I passed much of the day with them, and have devoted the larger portion of my care to their suffering, but in vain with my efforts. The hand of death was upon them. I'll stop right there. And there's some more. Harris wrote later, morning clear and pleasant, light southwest wind. The doctors busily engaged with the sick, health of the party improving, but 5 new cases and as many deaths today. All but one of them were old cases. Some of the little children who have had the measles on them seem to have got over the cholera symptoms, but afterwards they died through sheer exhaustion. Dr. F. Francis, he had an attack of cholera last night himself. The deaths today were Old Morgan and daughters. Okay, Old Morgan. He's talking about my great-great-great-grandfather. He died there around Little Rock, and 2 of Lucinda's sisters died there too. Lucinda Morgan's Hosea and his sister Letty, Lucinda Morgan's father Hosea and sister Letty died in the cholera epidemic at Cauldron. Lucinda testified that John Miller took charge of the family and brought us on and attended to the drawing of rations or supplies as furnished by the government for use of the family. The group walked from Cauldron Creek, remember the water was too low, 40 miles north of Little Rock to the cones at Sallisaw, Oklahoma. That's where my dad ended up being born in 1921, where there was a Cherokee agent waiting for them. When they arrived, they were simply acknowledged and nothing more. There was no shelter, there was no food. They had no idea where to go or what to do. They were told to go wherever they wanted, but they were to register at Fort Gibson as soon as possible. Some stayed near that agency and some went on to Fort Gibson. Others, with the confirmation of Lieutenant Harris, went on to Beatty's Prairie or wherever they had relatives, with instructions from Harris to register at Fort Gibson as soon as possible. The record says that Lucinda arrived at Fort Gibson on May 16, 1834. It is not clear whether her group stopped at Fort Gibson on their way to Beatty's Prairie, or they went first to Beatty's Prairie and then coming back to Fort Gibson after they were settled. No one seems to know what happened to Lucinda's brothers after the family arrived that spring. Later testimony states her brothers died without having any children. Her sister Frankie married a Higgins, but no record of children has been found. Her sister Rosa did have at least one child, but also no record has been found. Lucinda's mother, Awi Wolf, lived for another 25 years, so she survived, even at her age, the Trail of Tears. That spring, Lucinda met and was married to Charles Fleetwood. That's my great-great-grandfather. He had a brother named Aquilla Fleetwood, which was, my father was named Aquilla Ose Fleetwood, and of course I'm Aquilla Ose Fleetwood Jr. The records show there was no post chaplain on duty during the time Charles and Lucinda were at Fort Gibson, so they either went to one of the missions to be married in the Christian way, or possibly they were simply married in the Indian way. Lucinda testified, "I married a soldier at Fort Gibson." She was 17 years old. Charles was 27 years old. And this is the account of my great-great-grandmother and her trek of the Trail of Tears. May God bless the Cherokee Nation.